Can you feel the level of comfort that Coach Butler now exudes when he takes the podium?
Um, I don't. Yeah, I guess so. I don't think it's like his favorite thing to do. I think like the one thing that probably we shouldn't take a leap just because he doesn't want to name names that he's not interesting, if that makes sense. Because like sometimes I think everybody gets caught up in like, oh, I want to hear who's where and how the depth chart's shaking out. And I thought he said some bullet points that were noteworthy yesterday, while sticking to his main premise, which is we're not going to get into like where this guy is at this moment, or who's on the rise and all that stuff. And I understand that. It kind of goes against what we're all chasing, of course, because for 365 days around here, it's like who's where on the depth chart and that sort of thing. But I thought like just the part about tackling and the physicality and practice, and also when he dropped the line, like all those new guys, we're feeling good about, like that's a noteworthy comment. So there was stuff in there.
BC, as you hear Coach Butler talk about physicality, you hear Coach Rhule talk about physicality. Like,
Yeah.
what is your takeaway from that? Obviously, it's a point of emphasis for them, but they seem to be really hammering on that particular subject. What do you, I guess, does that change your expectation of what you expect to see in the fall, or what does that do when you hear them talking about it?
There's all these little categories where things have shifted over time. And if you look at them in a slightly different way than someone else, maybe you can get an edge. And tackling and physicality and how you go about your practices, I think they probably believe is one of them. And you kind of heard that in John Butler's answer, which is why I thought that was interesting. I think he's as he said, he's been around Matt Rhule for like a year and a half, but he not even that, but just the way that his practices are conducted, he said it's elite with just how physical it is, and how much emphasis there is on that aspect. And I like that he stressed the live tackling, and it's different, than hitting a sled or any toys you roll out there, anything like that. And so I think they can really gain an edge on it. And this was 2 years ago. I thought Nebraska was a really good tackling team. I did think they took a step back a little bit last year, and I think the staff did as well. So it doesn't surprise me that is a priority to get that back, where you're one of those top 5, top 10 teams in the country that do it well. And it can make all the difference in this league. If you have a 3rd and 6 and you are that precise tackling team that holds a play to 3 yards and doesn't let the 4 yards after contact, that's the difference between winning and losing. And so I think that it's a category where they believe they could get an edge, and so stress it to with all gusto and see what happens with it.
Yeah, it's just I don't know what to make of it other than, and I'm fortunate, right? Because I do get to see a little bit, but I do find it interesting that they're not afraid. Because sometimes, and I like the way Ravi asked the question to you. He said, "Does it change your expectation level?" I think sometimes coaches have this level of, okay, how will this be received if I say this at the podium? But then you double down on it and you say it in this repetitive fashion. Physicality. Hey, I think we're a physical team. Coach Rhule went into detail the other day. Hey, a guy gets loose down the sidelines, and then are we tracking the near hip? Are we doing this? And then later on in the scrimmage, guys aren't running open, and we get guys to the ground. And Coach Butler talks about physicality. They're not really worried about setting some false expectation level, because sometimes we don't know how to receive the information. They're like, hey man, we're a physical football team, and they're not afraid to know that people could take that and run with it, depending on how it lands with us emotionally. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the key point too is when he was talking about when you're addressing players about it and they come to him and they say, what can separate me from someone else? What can get me to the league? Great tackling, but that's what he says. Like, that's the difference, that there's that gap between guys who can do it really well and those who don't. And then, everybody on that roster has had success playing football just with their unbelievable God-given abilities growing up. But now I think as he's stressed, there's the younger guys who see, like, if I want to play, like, let's say I am in that DB room where there's so many guys, I have to be ultra physical. This is a physical game. I can't shy away from that. And so I think that they're putting it right in front of guys' face. Like, this is an everyday thing. There's not going to be a lot of jogging. We're going to get after it. And this is what hopefully will separate us from others in the fall in these games that are going to be decided by a narrow margin. There's a lot of teams working hard all over the country. We know that. But I do think that coaches are trying to measure, like, how to it's a candid question, like how to measure being physical with, like, the safety concerns and everything that's going on. And I think they feel like they found a healthy balance there to try to do it well.
BC, when you hear, and I know we heard from Coach Butler yesterday, but I want to kind of loop Coach Rhule in again. When you hear them talking about the secondary, whether it's Coach Rhule saying, hey, we've got 6 guys that can start at corner or 5 guys that can start at safety, and then you talk about how you've got how they're practicing and how physical they're being and everything, does that give you confidence in the depth of that room or concern that more guys haven't separated themselves yet as sort of that starting caliber?
I don't want to grab the Kool-Aid too early in the morning, but if I have to pick one or the other, it gives me confidence because that's what I wanted to hear this spring. Like, I feel like there's so many, like, second, third year newcomer guys in that secondary that we have been kind of excited about, or we heard kind of teasers about last year. And it's like, okay, this would be about the time when they should start to move forward and put a little pressure on the guys who have been here 4 or 5 years. They understand what's expected now, sort of like the veterans. In a way, they are veterans at a certain point. I think after you've been in a program a year or so, you start to know as much or get closer to knowing as much as some of those guys who have a couple years on you. And so that's what I hope would happen with that group in the spring. There's, like, too many guys that we write hopeful and talk hopeful things about in that secondary to not want to hear what Rhule said on Saturday.
BC, when does it add to the intrigue of what you think this defense is capable of doing? You heard Coach Butler reference Terry and fitting in the run game and knowing the fronts. You know that they've got a ton of options. Do you feel like you know more about the defensive trajectory or the offensive trajectory? Given that it seems like the defense tells you more, they just have more movable pieces.
Mm-hmm. The defense is more of a mystery to me, really. Just like what tweaks they're going to do. And, I think they've got some things up their sleeve that I would not expect them to unveil to the public. And so, when they talk about all these different personnel groupings and, these different packages where you can play a lot of players, it's hard to get your mind around who's exactly where. Like, I think you could form a good guess at, like, a 2 deep without hearing the names and be pretty close if you pay close attention on the day to day. But I think a lot of us on the outside don't know sort of the niche spots where certain guys could go or how this particular player could branch out and do this over here. And that's what's really interesting to me. Like, just you could take, like, a Deshaun Singleton as an example, just the different ways you could use them. But you could say that about, I think, any of those DBs. It sounds like when Rhule uses that word positionless, and it sort of being an objective, it sounds like it's kind of taking shape behind the scenes, which is really interesting. But also, when you're not seeing practices and stuff, it's hard to know exactly what that picture looks like. But I will say, I think John Butler thinks they're tracking well. I got that impression yesterday, and I thought it was an interesting part where he, and I think this is wise, he leans on Phil Snow, who's seen 4 decades of off seasons with different teams, and occasionally you throw it at a guy like that and say, are we on the right track? Are we making good time in Midwestern speak? And it sounds like the answer they're getting back is they feel pretty good about, especially that back seven. Like when you hear that at the linebacker, that the 2 spots, he said, I feel like we got a 3 deep there. It's pretty good. Then you hear, Rhule say, well, there could be 6 starting corners, 5 safeties, all that. I mean, that there's a lot of options in that back seven. Now the defensive line, I like Van Poppel's tone. It's just like, we're about the now, we're not about what was, but they're going to have to keep grinding. They're going to have to develop guys. And John Butler was actually pretty honest about that too. He said that one is going to go into the fall a little bit more.
He's a grown up.
Mm-hmm.
RVP is a
oh yeah,
grown up. But you know what? So let me just ask, how did it land with you that it's going into the fall? Is that because you think guys are so close and don't have a separator, or that they have so many that are capable?
Or maybe they
I think they're
found
different.
the guys that are
I think those are different.
Or are you worried that they haven't found guys that they feel are capable enough yet?
Yeah. It landed that it's still a development process, but also what they probably expected going in. That's how I took it. Now, that doesn't mean they're not encouraged by some things, because we've heard them say, like, and John Butler said this yesterday. He really likes what Terry Braden's doing with that group, and Phil Simpson, and how they're working it out. But it would be the natural expectation, especially, like, I was really intrigued to see like a Jalen George, like what he could do this spring. And he was a guy who was injured, he's a guy who came in off the portal. And so I think there are these pieces that still have to come into the equation. But RVP, man, I feel like he's a good example. If other guys follow his lead and the way he attacked last year when it didn't go exactly as he planned, they'll be okay. Like, that was an example of being selfless. Like, he thought that was going to be a season for him going in. When he realized it was going to be a red shirt, he gained like 8 to 10 pounds during the fall, which not a lot of guys do. And I mean, he's listed at 6'5", 290, but there's some guys just look massive for their measurement. And I think he's one of them. I just am really impressed with what he did with his body. And I think he attacked every element of that redshirt season to give him a shot, at least, to try to be a guy who just steps right in. And I like that he said the words, no one is irreplaceable, because we do get into this game around here where it's like, oh, what about this guy? I do this too, because we get so used to certain names, and we love Ty Robinson. We've talked about Ty Robinson for 6 years, but this is the cycle of football. It's time for move those pieces off the board. New guys were recruited for this reason, and I think they have a coach in Terry Braden who has a lot of energy, who helps boost their confidence. Like, it's go time for you guys. It's your turn now. Let's do it. And so I like that there's a very forward-thinking mindset, even while some of the conversation always backtracks about that particular position.
Yeah, I think I feel like I'm on an island on this one. I'm wildly optimistic about the defensive line.
Yeah.
I know that Ty and Nash were good.
Gilligan over here.
I do. I know that Ty and Nash were good. I really like the pieces in that room. I think RVP could have played a critical role last year and they didn't end up needing him to. Like, I think that room could be really, really good. And it's going to be different. Like, it's going to look different than it did last year, but I think it could be more disruptive. I don't know. I feel like I'm all by myself. I think that could be a really good room.
To your point, Ravi, and this isn't a knock on these guys, Nash was pretty banged up last year. It wasn't like the natural climb maybe that was expected, and because I think he was a little dinged up. And Jamari was dinged up a lot during his career. I mean, so we're talking about 2 guys who the last year were not
all the way
I don't think at 100. And so sometimes in that conversation, it's always like all 3 of those guys were maybe at the top of their game. And again, that's not a knock on them. I think there was an injury part with Nash and stuff, but 2 of them were not, because of they weren't 100. So that can be replaced. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but you can get there. And Elijah Judy's a guy who's got some determination, and I think it feels comfortable in his skin, So Uh, I'm not going to beat my chest and act like they're going to be great at this point, but I am open-minded to them being as good. They just got to keep getting better every day, and I think that's where John Butler was going yesterday.
Fairly subtle, and it kind of flies under the radar. But I like how he buoyed the development of his secondary and his defense by talking about measuring it against the development and growth of the offense and wide receivers. I like the way that he worded it, because what do we always do in spring until we can actually see? If somebody says, "Hey, then the D line had a good day," then it's like, "Oh man, the offensive line very good," or "Wow, we really ran the ball well today," and it's like, "Oh yeah, man, the defensive line is struggling." I like how he gauged it against their growth and development to see where they were as a barometer without saying anything too crazy, right? I mean that's a savvy, experienced guy that knows how to grade in a real fluid fashion.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a, hey, we're holding our own.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stories about Dane Key and Isaiah Hunter and everybody. We're doing all right, like in the numbers. He said it in the numbers too, like when they're charting like the man coverage and stuff, like it's coming out okay for us. And so definitely it was said in a way, it's like, don't throw like concern at the wide receivers or anything. I think it's a good give and take between those two position groups, but he's saying my guys, they can compete and they're doing fine. So, and they should. They've got some dudes who are really just interesting guys. I mean, all off season we could go through like 3 defensive back names a week, and all of them have like an interesting background and something where you could by the end of that talk convince yourself could be a player here. So I think they've recruited it well, and now it's just to keep that climb going and develop those guys, because that is a room. Mike Riley takes a lot of crap for like how it went here, but he once said that quote, like, corners are gold, DBs are gold, like to have a bunch of them, and so Nebraska's got a lot of options right now, and that's a good thing.
BC, another spot with the give and take. Are you hitting the panic button on either side of the line just because we like one of them, or are we cool there too? We gonna be okay?
I like that it's been nice to hear that the pass pro is what Rhule highlighted as being pretty good. And I think he's credited the offensive line throughout the spring. And so that's encouraging. I like that there's some guys, some different names putting some pressure on the O-line. Like you hear like a Tyler Knack come up, Grant Seagren, a guy sort of in the wings. I think they think's a good player. And so, I mean, that's an interesting group too. Like Justin, the center story sort of got solidified a little last week. It felt like with the Justin Evans conversation about him there and him having a gap over the rest of the field. But then that opens up the door about what you do at left guard. Obviously, there's plenty of options at right tackle, and you have 4 veterans who have been sitting off to the side. That's a tough group to put your 2 deep down in pen on. You can know or have a good guess at certain spots, but I don't think that's 100% on anything either. Like left guard and right tackle are really interesting to me, like how that sorts out, because sort of like the defensive backs, I do think they have some options there.
Listen, I go right guard, left guard. I agree with you. I do find it interesting, and I'm kind of guilty of what I don't want other people to do. But Coach Rhule is so forthright. We still parse through it, right? Why is he continually talking about Tyler Knack and Grant Seagren? Like, it's just not. It's just not his style. So is it? Hey, I want to give them a vote of confidence. Is it?
Yeah.
Hey, they're really good. Hey, stay with it. Because I had to back down off of this the other day, BC. A couple weeks ago, I told Ravi, and I don't know if I said this on air or just to him. I said, I'm quietly, I feel like I want to be impressed with the offensive line. Like I'm surprised. Like I was genuinely surprised at their productivity. And I heard Coach Rhule say it a couple weeks ago, and then he said it again. And maybe they're just going to be a good group. Like maybe they're just guys that he feels like he likes the competition there and it's competitive because I don't think you're far off in not being able to name a couple of positions. And I think we assume some guys are going to play positions because of the accolades they came with. And I don't know, man. Coach Rhule just strike me as the type of guy that's because it should be, he will. Like he's going to do what's right.
I mean, even if you took out guys who are developing from the conversation and you just said these veterans are coming back into the fold, there's still extras, like, so it that's why I think it's an interesting position group. And I do think it's been encouraging that despite the fact that some veterans who might be an important part of the mix come the fall are out, you're still hearing good feedback from the head coach. Like, I like where the O-line's at. I mean, that was 2 Saturdays ago. The O-line was sort of the main headline that he gave us. And I know sometimes things are said to boost confidence, probably. He doesn't say anything just to say it, though. And I always keep that in mind. And whether this is right or not, I think it matters who comes in front of the media too. Like, I think that's a way of showing, like, this is a guy who's going about things sort of the right way. And Tyler Kanak was doing interviews last week. And so, stuff like that I always take note of, and you try to put little clues together, whether we get misguided or not sometimes with it.
I mean, he told us as much at media days last year that the guys that get to go talk to the media, that's part of a reward for them in terms of, even if it's not something everybody.
And yesterday, just quick, at Sierra Wright up front,
he had boys guys up there, didn't he?
Yeah, well, he offered confirmation to you, Damon, on one of your main points. It's that guys, even though it's ultra competitive, there's a lot of names. He had that part about, like, the closeness is real. Like, guys are really rooting for each other and all that stuff. And I know that's been a main bullet point you've stressed, that's a real thing. And so when Sierra said that, I was like, oh, Damon wasn't lying like he usually does. He was telling the truth.
Yeah, I'm a big false hope guy.
No.
BC.
That's Brian Christopherson, Husker247 BC. We appreciate the time as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.